Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland. Now, you know what you have to do. You've got to like this stream. You've got to subscribe. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications so you know when the show is going live, especially as football season approaches where we're bringing OTs back. Oh, yeah, baby. Giving our picks against the spread. Little competition with Bradley. Hello, speaking of the aforementioned Bradley Alsop, baby.
Hello, good afternoon. Wow, 50 of our banner shows. 50.
Yes, plus the OTs. So we've done actually quite a bit.
I'm sort of like, I know it's a little cherry picked because we have definitely done more than 50 because of OT, but it's just nice to see the.
I know.
I love myself.
5-0.
I love myself a benchmark. I love myself a round number.
I understand that.
Congrats to us. I'm super thrilled that I made it through training camp, survived cut day.
Yes, you did.
That'll be ready for week 1.
What's the number? So say you were the quarterback, which is how most people envision themselves. What would your number be?
I'd maybe do my birthday number, 26.
26?
Yeah.
No, you can't be 26 and be a quarterback.
Why
That's
not?
a running back's number.
That's fine.
Quarterbacks are numbers 1 through 19.
I've never been one to fit in the mold, you know.
But it's literally not allowed. Teddy Bridgewater just had to change it from 50. So I'm
an iconoclast.
I'm asking you to stretch your imagination.
Okay. What about 7? Can you do 7?
7's great. Honestly, that was my number when I would do.
Or can you do 13? Is 13 another
13
one?
is another
I can do
one.
13 because 13 is half of 26.
Yeah. I mean, do you not remember players' numbers? Is that not your mind works in a way where you just remember a bunch of names but not the numbers associated? Like it never registered in your brain that quarterbacks are 1 through 19.
I don't think I never am a numbers guy with that.
No
football.
way.
I don't really remember football. Like I'm always looking at their names. I think maybe I obviously know about numbers corresponding to position groups, but I don't think I really pay attention to it. And 2,
well, they changed it recently.
I was gonna say, isn't it recently too that sometimes like you'll see like a linebacker or like a safety with like the number 7 or something?
They've allowed for 0. They've allowed for single digits for other positions. Look, I mean, I'm maybe an old stick in the mud like that. I like to be able to have a number association with like a position. I mean,
I get it.
For example, Josh Jacobs is now 8 as a running back. He changed his number in his return to Las Vegas. We'll get to that in a bit. But you have linebackers. I think Isaiah Simmons last year, who just got traded to the Giants, also wore single digit. It just is confusing to me. I like the ability to be able to have the shorthand when I don't know the guy's name to know which position he is without having to like look at his measurables, or look up the roster. But
yeah,
that's just old lady talk. When I was young,
you're a fogey.
Yeah, but 7 was my number when I played basketball. I think, and I used to do 7 versus 14, like because it was with double. But I don't think 14 is a very visually appealing number, I will say. So I like 7 and I like 8. Like Lamar Jackson in 8. I mean, even Daniel Jones.
And isn't Rodgers 7?
Rodgers is 8 now, Bradley. 8 on your team.
Was he not 7 before?
No, he was 12 before.
Oh, yeah.
This is an unbelievable development. You just don't have that register in your brain whatsoever. AR 12.
Is Mahomes 7?
Bradley. He's 15.
Mahomes is 15.
You don't know any quarterback's number in history.
Brady was 12.
That's obvious. That's the bare minimum.
Drew Brees was
9.
6. Oh,
9.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think maybe Brady's the only one I affirmatively. Oh, well, maybe Anthony Richardson. Is he 15 also?
He was 15 in college. Now he's 5 because he doesn't want to be AR-15 anymore.
I see. Yeah. No, I'm always looking at the name on the jersey. I really don't.
Unbelievable.
The numbers really don't register.
That is just like something really new that I've learned about you. Because for me, I love playing that game in my mind. Like, who's the best 4? Brett Favre.
Oh, I was going to say Peyton.
Oh, my gosh.
Who's Peyton Manning 4?
Peyton Manning did not wear number 4.
9?
Oh, Peyton Manning wore 18.
Oh, 18.
Yeah.
So he can do 18 but not 26. It's only 8 off.
Anyway, we'll get off of this. It's just I learn something new about you every day. We will get into more football talk in the rest of the show. I should have said right out the start, out the trail, Dan Schneier of Big Blue Banter, but really of CBS Sports. That's his his larger gig, I believe, will be with us to give us some fantasy tips ahead of drafts.
I need it because I have 2 simultaneously tonight.
Bradley has 2 fantasy drafts tonight.
At the same time, at the exact same time.
And we also should say that next week you will be out on Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, we'll do like a mega show. We'll do some season previews. Well, I mean, that night is the opening night.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll do a real show on Thursday in place of what we have going on Monday.
And
then
preview.
We're figuring out the programming for the rest of the NFL season, and we will give you guys an update on that next episode. But that's how things are going to shake out next week. Bradley will be out, so we will be doing a big NFL-centric 2023 season show ahead of, and we'll give our Super Bowl predictions, all that kind of stuff. We'll do a little bit more of that today, just a bit of a taste where I think we should pick the division winners and see where some of the best value is at. We will get to that in a second. But let's start off with some European traditional football news, because this story just continues to get more and more insane. Spanish prosecutors have reportedly opened up an investigation into Luis Rubiales, who is the president of Spain's soccer federation, who on camera, we played this last week, kissed one of the players on the team that had just won the Women's World Cup, Hermoso, kissed her on the lips without her consent. And now FIFA has suspended Rubiales. There have been contradictory statements on his end on that front, where eventually at the start he was kind of apologetic in some vague way, but then later on, after apologizing, walked that back and blamed Hermoso for saying, well, she lifted me off of my feet and moved me close to her body, and so, you know, I had to kiss her in the middle of probably the pinnacle of her professional life against her consent, without her consent. And then he said that everyone was a fake feminist, that were criticizing him, and that they were assassinating his character, things to that effect. Standard, just, oh, woe is me, I'm the victim for getting called out for doing something really wrong.
I will say every person on the administrative side of this situation has acted in the most, like, they have fulfilled the most insane quality and insane response at every turn. Like, there has not been one, like, normal or, like, even sort of, like, coherent response to any twist and turn that this has taken outside of Jenni Hermoso being like, I was pressured to say that it was consensual and that it wasn't a big deal,
and I didn't want to take away from the celebration,
and from our victory, and then leading to them, the players rightfully so, you know, withholding play until there is some action taken against Rubiales. But like, Rubiales himself was like saying he was going to resign, and then at his press conference said over and over and over again in Spanish, I'm not going to resign, I'm not going to resign, I'm not going to resign.
Yeah, it's the
FIFA suspended him, and then ultimately
Wolf of Wall Street speech.
Right, exactly. I'm not fucking leaving it. And then ultimately the Spanish Federation also literally like hired multiple lawyers to threaten legal action against FIFA for going after Rubiales in that way. For suspending him. And
they could get legal action from Hermoso for not doing anything.
And I'm not sure
and that would be righteous.
And I'm not sure exactly how substantiated this is, but friend of the show, Brennan in Kentucky, sent me this, that it apparently Rubiales' mother said that she was going to lock herself in a church where she lives and go on a hunger strike due to protesting the treatment of her son.
That's really, really dramatic.
So I just mean, like, every single person with some sort of responsibility to these players is acting in the most unhinged, fanatical, insane way possible.
It's just crazy. I mean, she confirmed that it was not consensual, and that should be the end of it, let alone the incredibly inappropriate setting for that kind of physical affection, the inappropriate nature of who was providing, or I shouldn't even call it physical affection, the force, the assault.
Yeah.
From his end, like, it seems to be really about the patriarchal structure in the Spanish Football Federations, this backlash and this kind of, you described it as chauvinism, this when we were chatting about this last week, how proud they are of it. It's like this, they almost romanticize their chauvinism and act like it's this form of expression as opposed to what it is, which is a display of power on a group of women, a female soccer team that has been stripped of its power for many years because men in different countries have gotten a disproportionate amount of funding, resources, all of that. And so the response here to Rubiales is indicative of the larger systemic problems that already plagued women's soccer in Spain and in other countries.
Yeah, and also it's interesting that just prior to this action being taken, Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, was like giving a speech where he basically was like, teach women, the women athletes and women soccer players, like, you're the ones who need to make the change to be equal with men and to advocate for yourself. Like, teach us. We need to learn from you. Equal pay in the World Cup isn't going to do anything. Like, that's meaningless because it's only one competition a year. There needs to be more than that. Teach us. Let us lead the way for how we can help you. And it's like, okay, well, basically every single global federation, a country federation in the entire world has some form or combination of menacing pay disparity issues, structural issues, resource issues, and then on top of that, most of them, if not in some capacity, are sexually assaulting or harassing or belittling their athletes. And now, literally, the team that won the World Cup, this is no bargain basement side for a country. They just won the highest accolade in the sport.
Yeah.
The story about their team is their chauvinistic owner who is friends with the other head of the women's department in the federation, whose son is the coach, who literally was being boycotted prior to them participating in the World Cup. He is under investigation by your own body for sexually harassing one of them on stage, on camera at the World Cup. So, what are they supposed to teach you? What do you need from them that you are not providing for them?
Yeah.
Because you're not supporting them.
Well, and then, yeah, and you list that out, and still somehow these people will say that she could have done something differently, as opposed to looking inward at their own biases.
It's exactly, it's insane for that message basically to be one of personal responsibility, that these women athletes have the responsibility to not only liberate themselves, but liberate others via education. And they have zero structural backing to do so, and in some ways are being actively harmed by the institutions that back them.
Yeah, 100%. And it just is. It goes to show, by the way, that this is a large problem in sports that don't have a ton of money or spotlight on them to the same degree. And it's not just limited to women's sports, but because obviously the sexual assault and cover up happened within, say, the Blackhawks organization in the NHL.
Right.
And I also believe there was a scandal with younger hockey players within Canada in one of the youth leagues that I'm blanking on the name of. So, of course, there's predation there against boys and young men when it comes to that sport. But we see it within the context of the gymnasts that were targeted by Nasser as well.
Yeah, I think it was just Hockey Canada also, by the way, the national hockey federation in Canada as well. But yes, of course, as you're saying too,
the more power you have over people and the less funding that certain sports or organizations have, the more rife this kind of predation is, particularly because there are girls that might be participating in sports or young people who have dreams. And so when people have dreams, when they're a part of industries that are more, based on one's performance or individual, getting ahead in some kind of way, whether it's a sport or within media, that there is a lot of predation, not just media, I should say, acting, directing, writing, whether that's through wages being held by the powers that be, or whether it be through sexual harassment and assault. So this is the kind of stuff that needs to be called out, rooted out, and just shines a light on the gulf between in respect and in treatment between men in the same position and women in the same position within the sport of soccer.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's a good reference to the to Nasser and the Michigan State wide-ranging, comprehensive, years-long predation by Larry Nasser on gymnasts. Both in the both middle school and high school, as in the pipeline for gymnasts women gymnasts, as well as in college. That where that abuse of trust is paired with an inability to sort of withstand or surpass into institutional heft.
Yeah.
That the people who are supposed to be entrusted with the safety and the sanctity and the support of the athletes is captured either by something, not only just greed or money or association or nepotism in certain cases, but also things that are more pernicious, like a lack of respect for the people that they are supposed to serve in some ways, that also then translates in something like this to wanting servility out of those people.
Yeah,
and
it's all
and wanting
connected.
to dominate them.
It is
basically.
all connected. Power, privilege, the wages when you have more money, you have more power and you get better treatment. This is how these structures of hierarchy work, and they replicate themselves in institutions like this as well. Let's talk though about the big news over the weekend as it pertains to the NFL, which is that Trey Lance has been traded to the Cowboys for a 4th round pick after the 49ers traded up to 3 and then added 3 first round picks, including the pick that they traded up for with the Dolphins in that trade, to get up to be behind the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets to select the 3rd quarterback off the board, who was Trey Lance. Now, I was like bullish on the fact that it's not going to be Trey Lance. I don't understand the smoke around this. I know Kyle Shanahan. He wants a Kirk Cousins type guy. He wants somebody who can be ready to go, has the processing ability to run a very complicated offense, and Mac Jones, coming out of Alabama, has that capacity. He's done it before. He's done it at a high level, and I was higher on Mac Jones than say I was on like Tua coming out of college, because Mac's bigger and I think has a stronger arm, and I thought it would be a perfect fit for what Shanahan was trying to do. Now it ended up being Mac Jones obviously going to the Patriots. Trey Lance was taken with the 3rd overall pick, and like, at the time, there were a lot of people who raised their eyebrows, who had the same thought as I did. And there's been subsequent reporting that shows that the trade was initially done with Mac Jones in mind. And it appears that at some point, Kyle Shanahan changed his mind. And some of the indications on that front are that Shanahan was worried that the rest of the league was catching on to maybe some of the things he did on offense, and he wanted to add another dimension to the offense, which is to have a quarterback that can run. In the end, it's ended disastrously, and the Miami Dolphins used the picks that they got from that trade to trade for Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb. And the Miami Dolphins, that's much. You can look at that package versus what the 49ers got, which was Trey Lance, and setting back their franchise in this way. It's one of the worst decisions in the history of the draft. And I don't think that is being too unkind. It's kind of masked because the 49ers are so goddamn talented and Shanahan is such an incredible game planner that these decisions don't get the scrutiny that maybe they deserve. At the same time, I give them credit for cutting bait when they knew it wasn't going to happen anymore. But like I said this, I didn't like Trey Lance coming out of the draft. I did not think he was the athlete that was being described. Justin Fields looked like a better athlete, had more fluidity. Lance was very stiff. I think that showed in his time with the 49ers. And the issue it seemed to be was that he just was not a natural player of the position of quarterback. That he just didn't really have the vision to play the position, at least as of now. But I'm frustrated a little bit by Trey Lance being such a huge story in this way still, because I think it's been clear for a while. Maybe I just wasn't as high on him as other people when he came out of North Dakota, but I've been down on him for like 2 years at this point.
I think it's interesting, the few things that, like, when we talk about this particular move, because as you said, there's definitely a lot of like dialogue and conversation about a guy who has essentially played like 5 games in the NFL, I think, in his entire career.
And none of them looked good.
And but also even one of them was in that calamitous weather game in Chicago,
yes,
where it was like the field was completely flooded. So like we have like a little to like no understanding of like what this guy is as an NFL quarterback, and yet still
we do know. I'm sorry, but we do know. We do know, right?
I don't necessarily think, like, I'm thinking based on the decisions that have been made that he couldn't even be the third string quarterback, that clearly there is something that he is either not exhibited enough to even be a backup for the 49ers. Certainly, I'm saying, like, on the field production is not something that I would be confidently quantifying Trey Lance as an NFL quarterback. He's started like 4 games.
But that's the problem, right? Is like those circumstances are crappy, right? And he was drafted, he played 1 game during COVID and then sat out the rest of the year. But the circumstances also are where the player is at in their development, and you have to take that into account when you're taking him 3rd overall.
No, definitely, and also to say nothing of the fact that due to injury, also he didn't really play all that much at North Dakota State either.
Yes,
he only played about 9 games, either from like 2019 to 2020, prior to being drafted. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, he was already sort of like a block of clay when he was drafted. Like, there wasn't a lot, I think, to go off of and project. And then same thing, because of the same concerns that dogged him prior, that injuries and his durability going into his career as an NFL quarterback. For him, with all of that being said, with that much, like, with that little to his resume, to expend that much draft capital on him, and then after 2 or 3 years, send him to another team for a mid-round pick. If this was any other team that was like not nearly as professionally successful as the 49ers have been, given what they're able to do without a top-tier quarterback, this would be like a mark of shame on an organization and a complete disaster, a disastrously embarrassing scenario. If the Jets did this, this would be the laughingstock of the season.
Well, we would be talking about them in the same way that we talked about the Broncos and their, commitment to Russell Wilson,
right,
trading away all those assets and then extending him before the season even started and he looked terrible. Or the Browns with Deshaun Watson giving away all those assets. And hey, I have no faith that, even like putting aside the personal element, I don't have any faith that Deshaun Watson will get back to the guy that he was. Like, he might fundamentally not have the same relationship with football that he did before because of everything that went down. So like, that's not looking great either. And apparently the reports out of camp for Deshaun Watson have not been good. But putting those two kind of egregious examples aside, Trey Lance seems like a great kid. Like, everyone talks about how nice he is and all those things. And so maybe they got a little enamored with the person. But the reality is that you are, I think, at a certain point, required to show a certain level of progress and processing that he did not show. And you could say, Emma, you're holding Zach Wilson to an entirely different standard. That's maybe the case, but I just like the way the ball comes out of Zach Wilson's hands way more than I ever liked it with Trey Lance, who throws knuckleballs.
But I guess my thinking too is like, I obviously, as much as I think certainly for John Lynch and for Kyle Shanahan, this is certainly a swing and a miss to expend so much draft capital, to see what that draft capital became and to really have nothing to show for it with this guy. But I think it also goes to show that, like, they wanted the two of their three quarter. I mean, Sam Darnold came in, was traded from Carolina, from the Panthers after in New York was probably statistically the worst quarterback in the league. Sort of had a little bit of an uptick in Carolina last year while still not being all that great, and yet still got traded to San Francisco and
he signed with them in free agency,
or signed with them in free agency, and still was more like amenable to being on the team, or like more showed more in preseason to be on the team than Lance. And so I think, like, with all that being said, the reason I even bring up it's good news and bad news for 49ers fans and for the team itself, because on one hand, being able to mask this type of front office and organizational, like let's face it, like failure with a player like this is a testament to how good the team is.
Yeah.
That a guy that Brock Purdy, that a quarterback who was picked with the last pick in the draft, could lead or be a part of the team, a team that is so talented on both sides of the ball, getting to the conference finals, that Trey Lance was almost rendered an afterthought. But the fact that this process still played out the way that it does, procedurally, it was a mistake, and it's more even clear now that there couldn't even be the concession of a second or third string roster spot for this guy you drafted so highly and traded draft capital for to salvage that. And now he's literally on another team, and that experiment is completely over. Like, it speaks to some sort of procedural organizational breakdown there between Lynch and Shanahan.
Yeah, and there have been reports that Lynch was more of a Trey Lance guy, as was Brad Peters, I think is his name, the assistant general manager. They've made some weird moves in San Francisco. Like, they also made weird moves of going after Jimmy Garoppolo instead of kind of coughing up the money that they wanted to for Kirk Cousins at the time, because Kirk Cousins was Kyle Shanahan's ideal quarterback. He is going to be the robot that processes his entire offense and throws the ball with a lot of precision. So they didn't make that. They didn't look, I think, deeply enough into what that would mean for their team. But like, I also, the part of maybe why I'm a little bit more pessimistic is I just don't really think Brock Purdy has shown amazing qualities. Like, I think people are really jumping the gun on his proficiency at the quarterback position, because he, again, was thrust into arguably the best situation in football in terms of having Trent Williams as your left tackle, having a very good offensive line. Christian McCaffrey at one point in the season came around. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, one of the best defenses in the NFL. This is the support system that is there for San Francisco 49er quarterbacks. And that's why I say we know what we need to know about Trey Lance at this point. And that's why I don't understand what the Dallas Cowboys are doing at all, because he isn't even a good backup to have. He hasn't played football. The problem is that he doesn't have the experience to be an effective player. When you're a backup, you're supposed to come in and you're supposed to be able to at least hold down the fort, not take a bunch of chances. And someone like Malik Willis is showing immense progress in that way, right? Like, Willis is still making some bad decisions, but he had an incredible pass for a touchdown when he started last game with the Tennessee Titans. He's showing real progress. Trey Lance never really showed that much progress. And so for that to be the high pick that he was, man, it's just, it's one of the worst draft decisions in the history of the sport.
And I think also, like, I don't like for me personally, like, I don't have a whole lot of faith in Malik Willis as like a long-term projection as like a NFL quarterback or a starting NFL quarterback. But as you're saying, like, I just think there are differences. Not every team situation is the same. Not every developmental situation is the same. But like, and also Willis was obviously drafted later, but like, he's still like he's on the team.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's almost.
Well, it seems like Trey Lance, they would have been okay with him being the third stringer, and he wanted out because
with Lance.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. He wanted out even despite, like, he could have been, but he didn't want to be. Potentially.
That's what Shanahan said. He sent him home for the day after giving him the news. So.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, even if that's the case, so maybe if that is the case, that he didn't even want the third string job, that it wasn't necessarily he wouldn't make the roster at all. I think even the fact that that's the conversation, given where he was drafted and what was given up for him, there's no way to look at that but as a swing and a miss.
Yes.
For an organization that not only has shown, despite that, to be a Super Bowl contender, but like consider what they might be if they didn't have to rely on the last pick in the draft, in Brock Purdy,
or if they
Sam
drafted
Darnold.
Patrick Mahomes,
Right? I guess in the sense of like,
which they never even considered.
It's one of those things that as I was saying before, it is one of those things that like, it's great. It's a great issue to have that your team has been so well built and so good that the most important position in the entire league has not come back to bite you in ways that it has for many, many other teams, including the one team that I root for. However, it also clarifies the limitations of making a mistake like that. That you maybe don't have that franchise quarterback. That you did sink those assets into another team for them to draft high, them to draft / trade for, or sign like significant blue chip talent in Tyreek Hill and Bradley.
I mean, the Niners have been good drafters for the most part too. But the problem here is that they're getting older, and the Seahawks are not like a team to turn your nose up at. Let's actually just do that then. I want to give a little bit of a teaser for what we're going to do next week. We're going to pick the playoff winners and not playoff winners, but we'll probably pick the Super Bowl winner and like who we think is going to go to the playoffs. But I wanted to just touch on the odds here for the division winners for the NFL season, because I don't know if I've ever seen it this wide open in essentially every division. Now, it's not wide open in the AFC West, I would say. The Chiefs are going to win the AFC West. I think that's pretty clear. But the other 3 AFC divisions, and I would say 2, maybe 3 of the NFC divisions, are pretty damn wide open. So let's just start here with the AFC. You can see here the AFC East has the Buffalo Bills at plus 120, the favorite to win, but still, like, it's fairly wide open. The Jets at plus 270, the Miami Dolphins at plus 300, the New England Patriots at plus 800. The only team I would eliminate from winning that division is the New England Patriots, and they're not even going to be, I don't think, bad. They'll finally, they were hovering around 500 for most of the year, and they had the most incompetent offensive staff in the entire league in Matt Patricia and Joe Judge.
Yeah, I also think this defense has the chance to be really, really good. And maybe even if they have just like a baseline sentience at offense with Bill O'Brien at offensive coordinator. But I agree with you. I think like just in terms of firepower and expectations, I just think it's probably between one of the first 3.
And I don't think it's the Bills. I'm just gonna say that right out the gate.
Right out the trail.
Yeah, right out the trail. I know. I was trying to stop myself from saying that again. I'm picking the Jets to win the division.
Oh, wow.
If I had to pick. I mean, the one thing, actually, I don't know if I even can do that, because their schedule, have you seen their schedule for the first like 8 weeks of the year?
Who, the Jets?
Yes.
It's terrible.
It's maybe the most difficult
bloodbath.
Schedule I have ever seen, like, in the NFL.
It's unbelievable. They're playing both teams from the Super Bowl in the first 6 weeks.
Versus the Bills, at the Cowboys, versus the Patriots, versus the Chiefs, at the Broncos, versus the Eagles, at the Giants, versus the Chargers.
So, like, in those 8 games, like, probably 6 of the potentially top 10 defenses in the league, and the Chargers and the Giants not even being that far behind in, like, who they can throw at them. So it's like, then it's like 6 of the top 10 defenses in the league potentially. Then also like, you have to play like Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence and Joey Bosa.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean that's the one thing, one knock against them. But I do think this Jets defense is definitely top 5 in the NFL. And they might take a little while to get their feet from under them. But like the Bills are less talented than the Jets and the Dolphins. That's immensely clear to me. The reason that they're the favorites is just because they have one of the top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Right. But he just does not have the support system that either Tua or Rodgers have.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like maybe the Dolphins, if I were to let's see what I can't pick the Dolphins to win the division because I have such fears about Tua staying healthy. But I mean, their schedule's nothing to write off either. At the Chargers, at the Patriots, first the Broncos, at the Bills, versus the Giants, versus the Panthers. It's a little bit better, but the whole AFC East is being screwed over by this rotating schedule situation because they have to play the AFC West and the NFC East, which is now better again.
I don't think. I honestly, but in terms of odds in this exercise, like, I don't think plus 300 for the Dolphins is that bad of a bet. Just because it's like it's a little bit more. It's a little bit of a long shot, but things could break for them. But I also think that's my one hesitancy there is that things do kind of have to break for them for me to see them like winning the division.
Yes.
That like things have to, like, Jalen Ramsey's already out basically till December. We need to see if Tua can remain upright and remain healthy, given still that the offensive line is not fully intact, and Teron Armstead was having injury issues already in preseason when he was carted off from one of their practices. So I think it's like not a kind of an interesting bet, but it means a lot of things go right for them. I think.
Yeah, gun to my head, I'm picking the Jets to win the division.
Yeah.
But again, but it is amazing how I think it's way more wide open than people would think, because I think the Bills are going to have a difficult year. AFC West, we even need to spend time on this. The Chiefs are winning the division.
Yeah, the fact that the Chargers are the closest, and they're literally almost plus 300 relative to minus 165.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can just pencil that one in, barring an act of God, basically.
They're one of only two teams, I think, that have like negative odds, meaning, if you were to bet 100, you would make only 65 as opposed to over 100, which is what the plus indicates, right? If it's a plus 120 for the Bills, we would bet 100, you'd win 120. For the Chiefs, you just win 65. I mean, look, this is not gambling advice. We're doing this just purely for, mental exercise purposes. But betting 100 on that to win 65 is not a terrible bet.
Yeah,
either.
we're not gonna go around being like guaranteed.
Yeah,
absolutely. Bet every single dollar you have.
I mean, what are the odds for Mahomes to win MVP? That's something like plus 500 or something as well. And that's more factors in that situation, but that's not a bad bet either. The Chiefs are just not gonna fall off. I just can't see that happening. I think they could win the Super Bowl this year once again.
And I don't want, of course, I don't want to jinx anything, but literally, I think these odds basically reflect that the only thing that could possibly shift them is like truly like a catastrophe occurring.
And I think the Chargers are going to be a lot better with a much more competent offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore this year.
I agreed.
And the Broncos should be better with a much more competent head coach in Sean Payton. But am I ready to say they're going to overtake the Kansas City Chiefs? No. And
with the Chargers too, I think we also hopefully. I mean, this is my hope. Obviously, as you know, with me, I'm a.
Yeah,
I can't.
You're a
quit the
Chargers hopeful.
I can't quit them.
Truther.
But they did have terrible health luck last year, and specifically with their offensive line. And also Herbert was basically playing with a few like broken ribs or something for a lot of the season. Rashawn Slater will be back. They're young all-pro left tackle. Trey Pipkins on the right side was injured. So I just think they're going to have a little bit more injury luck, but despite having basically some of the worst last year. So I could definitely see them kind of being in a good position for second, but like I said, and as we've said, I just don't think there's any catching the Chiefs.
And the Raiders are arguably like could be the worst team in the AFC.
They could be. Yeah, I think there's a chance that they're really bad.
Yeah. I mean, the Chiefs betting against the Chiefs in that situation is you just betting that Mahomes is going to get injured.
Right, exactly.
And the one thing I should say too is that Chris Jones is still not reporting in the midst of this contract negotiation, and they need him in that defense. They really, really need him. So we shall see.
He is a game changer. Like he's a guy. He's an actual like I think sometimes people overinflate like single performances, but he is someone that literally like changes their defense.
Yeah.
So I agree for sure.
Other AFC teams here. So AFC West, the only one so far that I can think of that isn't wide open. I do not know if I agree with these AFC South odds here, but we'll start with the North. Another wide open one, in my opinion, the Cincinnati Bengals at plus 140, Baltimore Ravens at plus 235, Cleveland Browns at plus 400. I'm very low on the Cleveland Browns this year. And the Pittsburgh Steelers at plus 500. Now that is a very interesting bet to me.
I think that it's interesting that initially I was like thinking about the AFC East as like the pride of, or like so potentially the cream of the crop of the AFC, but like this is also a real, might be a real bloodbath.
Oh my gosh, completely. And the Bengals, they've started slow over the past 2 years and really gained steam later on in the season. Can they maintain that this year? Especially with Joe Burrow basically coming in week one, it seems like cold, and who knows, because Zach Taylor is very, very sketchy with reporting injuries. I just want to put that out there. I don't know what the status of Burrow's soft tissue leg injury is right now.
Calf, if he's
and the Ravens
100%,
are just always ready to go. They're always ready to compete, and they're always physical. And the Steelers just look damn good. That's the thing. The Steelers look incredible in the preseason. Kenny Pickett is slinging it, and I know it's just the preseason, right? But on paper, honestly, their skill position players are certainly top third in the league. I mean, Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Then you have Jalen Warren and Najee Harris as the two backs as well. And Pat Freiermuth, is an up-and-coming tight end. So at least top half of the league, I'd put their skill position players up there.
And also, if their defense, I'm just thinking, if their offense
and it's Tomlin,
if their offense is like top half of the league, there's a potential they have, like, when healthy, like a top 3 to 5 defense.
Yeah.
Like with Minkah Fitzpatrick, Alex Highsmith, and TJ Watt all playing, and those are like the 3 top guys, like they have a chance to be a top, like I said, like top 3, top 5 defense, and that might be if their offense literally is maybe the 13th, 12th best in the league, that might be enough. Like,
yeah.
I think. Obviously, me and you I agree on this in the sense that we do not, underestimate or undervalue the Steelers at all. But I think they have a chance to really go from like our forecast of them last year being something of a sort of unknown quantity of like where they wanted to go or what they're seeing for this team to something being like, I think, much more fully realized.
Yeah.
And with the Ravens, I think obviously, I am trusting of the defense and what they're going to put into that defense, especially that when Roquan Smith sort of like stabilized the spine of the defense in the second half. We obviously still have to see what this Todd Monken led offense will look like, but I think the personnel is better than it has been in the last 3 or 4 years. And Monken, we saw what Monken could do with a rushing quarterback in Stet Bennett, a guy who was as old as Lamar Jackson was while still being in college and very much not the athlete that Lamar Jackson is. So I think we have reason to be optimistic for them, and of course we'll see. But like those 3, obviously, because I think the Deshaun Watson sized question is the problem with the Browns, but because I do think they do have a talented roster, but I think I'd put those 3 in order before the Browns in terms of my bets, in terms of like what I would be predicting.
I'm gonna bet that the Ravens win the division this year.
No, interesting.
I'm gonna go for it. I'm such a believer in Harbaugh. I'm such a believer in Lamar Jackson, and my guy Odell is there. So
I see what you're saying.
And I love Zay Flowers.
And I see what you're saying with the Bengals, in the sense of we do need to actually like see what's going on with Burrow before making too many big decisions.
I think the Bengals are definitely going to the playoffs. I think they're going to win the division. I would take the Ravens, again, gun to my head in that situation.
Yeah.
And then for the AFC South, I just think the Jaguars have way too many questions at the offensive line level for them to be that heavily favored to win the AFC South. I still think they're going to win if I were to choose, just because 2 years of Doug Peterson, the stench of Urban Meyer is behind them. Trevor Lawrence is, I think, going to make a huge leap this year, and I think they'll win. But the Colts are more talented than people think, and Shane Steichen is a really creative offensive mind who had a ton of success with Justin Herbert before they had to, go down that goddamn road with, he was the quarterback's coach.
Lombardi.
Yeah, with Joe Lombardi, who was terrible.
And then with the Eagles, and then with the the significant defined improvement that Jalen Hurts had season over season over season.
Exactly.
And I'm with you there. I think with the Jaguars, the big thing will be I think they got pretty underratedly good play from Luke Fortner, one of their rookie offensive linemen. But as you said, Cam Robinson's got to come back from his suspension.
Mm-hmm.
There was Walker Little has had struggled with health before. they are really going to be leaning on Antoine Harrison, their first round pick, to be their left tackle now that Jawan Taylor is in Kansas City. So there's definitely some things to work out, or at least see how those five, whatever the starting five, play as for Trevor. And also, I will say, they based on what they did in the offseason with the defense, which frankly was almost nothing. They are really relying on the fact, on their hopeful forecasting, that basically everyone on that side who is in their second or third year will make a significant leap. That first overall pick Trayvon Walker will be a difference maker.
Yeah.
That defensive Josh Allen will become more of a star as a pass rusher. Devin Lloyd, their other first round pick at linebacker. Chad Muma, their third round pick at linebacker. They want all of these guys to become more than what they were. So yeah. I think there are a few kind of question marks there, but I agree with you. I think I'd almost probably give this division the same odds as the AFC North, but just make it Jags, Colts, Texans, Titans.
Oh, Titans last?
I think they're going to be terrible.
Oh, I don't know. Vrabel can't. Texans might be picking first overall again this year. I mean, I love CJ Stroud. I think but
it's just the Titans have very much the worst offensive line in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear you. I just feel like that
Hopkins
defense
too,
is always...
And the defense will be good. You're
always coached the right way.
Harold Landry will be healthy again, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah. So Colts is like a deep flyer there, but probably Jaguars is what I'm going to go with if I really say... But I just think it's more wide open than the odds reflect, is all I'm saying there. Now to the NFC here. The NFC East, the only division that I think is definitely going to be won by one team, is the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't see the Cowboys beating the Eagles. I am lower on the Cowboys than a lot of other people, and it's not just because I can't stand them. I can't stand the Eagles either, but it's really just based on the fact that I do not trust Mike McCarthy to call plays, and I don't know why you would. He's shown a horrible track record and ruined years and years of Aaron Rodgers' career by being a terrible play caller. Now, the Giants at plus 900 seems absurd to me for it to be that low, but I still think the Eagles are winning the division. I could see the Giants coming in second, though.
I'd put them way closer to the 195 than to the 1300.
Their odds should be like plus 400 or something like that. That is why do they have worse odds to win their division than the Houston Texans? That makes no sense to me.
I agree, and I also will say I think
even the Commanders, like Bieniemy's making that offense look pretty damn good right now.
But I also will say I also feel like relative to what you're to the Texans and the Commanders in the odds distribution, we've seen what Brian Dable and Mike Kafka can do with this offense, and I think that the personnel is arguably better and more mature than they were last year.
Definitely.
We don't know what the Texans are going to fully look like under D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick, who is a relatively he was one of the more, in terms of recent history, a Shanahan disciple. But he's very young. He's like 36 also, first-time offensive coordinator. And same thing with Bieniemy, not in terms of Bieniemy's experience, but I'm saying, they're trotting out their fifth-round quarterback in Sam Howell.
Yeah,
and
he's looked pretty good. I will say they probably think that the odds makers probably think that because of the strength of the division.
Right, that's fair.
The strength, they think the Eagles and the Cowboys will be a much more difficult opposition for the Giants and the Commanders than the Titans and Jaguars will be for the Texans and for the Colts. So I hear that thinking, but the NFC East is more open than people realize, especially because the Eagles just lost 5 defensive starters, both coordinators, and Nick Sirianni did have issues calling plays before Shane Steichen got a little bit more involved. So for me, I'm still picking the Eagles for sure because that roster's top 5 in the NFL, but could I see them falling off, especially if someone like Jalen Hurts gets injured and Mariota's looked bad in the preseason? I don't know, man.
And whereas too, and when it was speaking to the Cowboys too, with the odds there, like I feel like that plus 195 is kind of not accounting enough for the McCarthy playmaking experience.
I agree.
Play calling experiment that's to come.
Yeah.
Like I feel like
that defense still rocks.
The defense is still. I think the defense has a chance to be the best in the league. I think it's going to be really, really good. But like Mike McCarthy with full creative control of the offense is not, while also having to obviously assume clock management and other strategic decisions, does not fill me with a lot of confidence for the offense.
I could not agree more. And then this is where I'm going to be controversial, and I'm going to just stir the pot slightly and think that the Seattle Seahawks win the NFC West.
Oh, interesting.
The Niners are getting a little too old, and I'm worried that the wheels are falling off. There have been a lot of distractions this offseason. And look, I got to think more about it. But if I were to pick a value, it's clear to me that the Seahawks plus 230, that could 100% happen.
I like that, honestly.
They are building a really impressive roster. I loved both of their draft picks in Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devin Witherspoon. I know both of them have been struggling with injuries to start the season, but Witherspoon should be back soon, I think, and Smith and Jigba is getting wrist surgery. It's like a fracture. It's nothing too horrible. So,
and I just think in terms of the element that JSN can provide for their offense, I feel like it makes a whole lot of sense that for them to like trot out, Gino, the tandem of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, the DK, Tyler Lockett, JSN, the two rising stars on their offensive line, Abe Lucas and Charles Cross, and having Shane Waldron still there, who I think is a really good play caller. I just think like there's...
And no Nick Bosa right now yet at all
in terms of
his contract. Either way, it's going to be a slow ramp up. I don't care, if you're the best at your position. For the most part, it really does take a little bit more time to ramp yourself up. So I don't know. The Niners are more talented. I agree. If you were to pick, more players from the Niners than from the Seahawks, or if you were to go position by position, you'd pick more 49ers. But do I think that they could get off to a slow start? Do I know that Purdy is fully healthy from that very kind of bizarre and difficult elbow injury? Do I think that their offseason has been filled with distractions as it relates to Trey Lance? Yes. So
I also think that there is like a real apprehension, at least for me, in relying heavily on Christian McCaffrey's health to make this offense the best that it can be.
Yeah.
And because we've seen it year after year, when he's healthy, he's like one of, if not maybe the most electrifying offensive player in the league. But when he's not, it's a real drag on the performance of his teams.
I agree.
And so I also think I will say, not to win the division. I'm not saying that. I think I am feeling more confident in the Rams than I was earlier in the offseason. I think they have a chance to be better.
I could see them being better.
I'm thinking that just maybe with more health on the offense and with a reunion of Sean McVay and Mike LaFleur, who I think maybe have a better and maybe could have a better working relationship / there might be a little bit of a return to form for him in a McVay setting, that the offense could look much better. But of course, obviously, complete speculation. I just think it's possible that they succeed, that they have more success than they did last year. The defense is still obviously extremely anonymous. Like there's nobody on the defense, but I think the offense could look better.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and then final two divisions here: the NFC North and NFC South. I am fading the Lions.
Yeah, I'm still with you there. I'm still fading.
I'm sorry, Lions fans, but you didn't ask for this, but for some reason everyone's obsessed with your team, and I think it's just because there's so many great fantasy players on the offensive side of the ball. But it's the same way that people overinflate, I think, Justin Fields as a player right now, is because the rushing upside, the fantasy value is sometimes conflated with good team play. The Lions, I don't think, have done enough to improve their defense. I know that they got that nickel corner from Philadelphia, whose name I'm blanking on right now. It's not really.
CGJ, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Yes,
yeah.
Who thankfully, it looked like he might have had a bad injury, but it seems to be fine. And then the Vikings, their defense looks terrible. Still is from a roster perspective, I think pretty bad. But
They lost Darius Smith too. He's not there anymore. Yeah.
Brian Flores is going to make the most out of a bad situation because he's a very good defensive defensive coach. But is it enough? I'm not sure.
Right.
The Chicago Bears, I am also fading for those reasons. I think Fields is electric as a runner, but he has a really long way to go when it comes to passing the football.
I'd lay better odds with the Packers than with the Bears.
I already said this.
Sure.
I already spoiled it.
Yeah.
I already spoiled it. I'm picking the Packers to win the division. I think that their roster...
And plus 400 is nice there for that pick,
nice.
honestly.
Nice. I mean, absolutely. So, yeah, I really do feel like the Packers are being undervalued because of Aaron Rodgers. And
agreed.
Rodgers looks amazing with the Jets, but the situation was so toxic in Green Bay that I think people are underestimating how it's going to feel for the rest of the players to not have that constant stress about Rodgers being there and the spotlight being on them for that reason. What is he going to do next? Is he going to leave, etc.? I just think the Packers are very good value on that front. And then for the NFC South, also completely wide open. I think the Bucs are... Look, Todd Bowles is a bad head coach. But should they be fourth in that division after winning it last year? I'm not exactly sure. But in my heart of hearts, I'm going with the Falcons. I'm fading the Saints and the Panthers. The Bucs and Falcons look like the best options for me there. But objectively, the least exciting division in the entire situation. So we're going to take a quick break. We are going to try to connect with Dan. And when we come back, hopefully we'll be talking about fantasy football with Dan, who is a writer for CBS Sports. We are back, and we are joined now by Dan Schneier, senior fantasy sports editor for CBS Sports, who also has a New York Giants podcast where I first became familiar with Dan's work. It's called Big Blue Banter. It rocks. It's very, very well done. Dan, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on, Emma. Obviously, as you know, I've been following your work for a while as well, so I'm excited to be here.
I really appreciate it, and he's doing it from his parents' home, so taking time out of his family time to give us some fantasy sports advice, fantasy football, I should say, which we really need. Bradley has 2 drafts tonight, so he's going to be listening very intensely.
At the same time.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Simultaneous drafts.
Who scheduled that for you?
Yeah, it's not nice.
Yeah.
I voted against it in both. So, no
I understand.
No problem.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess I just want to start here. I mean, what are the general trends that you're seeing? Because for me, I'm starting to wonder if the value of having that bell cow running back in the first round, even in non-PPR formats, like I think in PPR formats, it's clear taking a high-end wide receiver is probably the best way to go if you have that ability at the top of the draft. But for even half-point PPR, some of these guys in these offensive systems like Tyreek Hill, they're getting a ton of yak and they're getting a ton of volume. And with the sport trending towards the passing game, I mean, and having been doing so for years, and all these play callers getting so creative, I'm just curious what your take is on that transition away from the privileging of the starting RB1 versus maybe wanting to go towards getting a wide receiver one in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, Emma. It's been more extreme this draft season than I've ever seen before. In the past, last year, we started to see it start to trend toward people realizing, okay, I don't have to just jam the RB button for the first 2-3 rounds of my draft because of the scarcity. I can understand that there are things like anti-fragility. When you invest in the running back position, there's a much more likelihood of that player getting injured. You want to put your most important assets into that position. You have to ask yourself that question. I've always been a very wide receiver heavy drafter, and I've always been looking to get those later round running backs. But now you're starting to see everyone do it, which does present the opportunity, I think, this year to have value at the running back position and what we used to term in the industry as the dead zone. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but there used to be a range of every draft where it was like rounds 3 through 6, 4 through 6, where people were just scrambling to get running backs. They felt like they needed to fill those positions out. When in reality, if you play in a league that has a flex spot, for example, your starting flex position is worth just as much on a weekly basis as your RB1 or your RB2. And my whole strategy has always been beat my opponents to the flex, have the best possible flex receiver I can have to outscore their flex and worry a little bit less about running back. But now there's actually some value in that range. Dameon Pierce, James Cook, Alvin Kamara coming off the suspension is going really cheap. Those are 3 names I really, really like in the quote unquote dead zone for running backs. So with that trend switching toward what you said, Emma, at the beginning, with more receivers going in rounds 1 and 2 and even 3 than ever before, you're starting to see finally some value at the running back position rounds 4 through 6.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really interesting trend in that way, because it also seems like when you listed James Cook, it's like we've been waiting forever for him to actually prove that he can be RB1 in Buffalo. But can they run the ball with anybody in Buffalo has been the question for a long time. But I would also say, like, Dameon Pierce, Alvin Kamara, I think they're also getting undervalued because the teams are bad. But volume is so much of what matters, especially when it comes to the drafts that you're the picks that you're when you're selecting in the first 1, 2, 3, or 4 rounds, right? Because then you can take flyers on rookies later on. But just curious what your take is on that being the reason for their devaluation.
I'm sorry, say that again, Emma. Being the reason what?
The teams being bad or not perceived as offensive firepower or offensive, juggernauts, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about that. That is often why these players get devalued. And volume is ultimately the number one thing to chase in fantasy football. The best way to look at it is you can always find regression in the people who have too many touchdowns or too few touchdowns from a year before. A great example is Deontay Johnson, right? He had 146 targets last year, but he had 0 touchdowns. He's a great positive regression candidate because it's very unlikely that he's going to score 0 touchdowns over a full season. But you know that the volume will be steady year after year, at least if the quarterback stays the same in that situation. That when a quarterback changes, that changes things up. As far as running backs on bad offenses go, I would say this. James Cook is a little bit different on the Buffalo offense, but as far as Dameon Pierce and Rachaad White, those types of players who could inherit a lot of volume maybe on a bad offense, I think it's important to look at system fit as well. That's what I try to do. So, for example, Dameon Pierce, one of the reasons I really like him is he's joining a Texans system. They're bringing over Bobby Slowick, who was the former passing game coordinator of the 49ers. What does that mean? It's going to be an outside zone run scheme, which is literally the perfect scheme for Pierce's skill set, which is a big reason I like him so much this year. On the flip side, someone like Rachaad White, who also should get a lot of volume over in Tampa on, again, a really bad offense. I don't really like the system fit there, and I don't love the talent either. So I think you have to be really careful in picking which players you're taking from bad offenses and make sure that they fit into the mold you're looking for.
That's a really good tip. And also, I mean, sometimes when in doubt, when I have a tiebreaker, I'll also go with the younger guy who has a little bit more opportunity to exceed their ADP or to have this surplus value that you might not necessarily assign to them in the draft process. And I think about later round receivers in that same way. Some of these rookies that are so polished coming out of college, like Zay Flowers is just impressing all over the place in camp for Baltimore. And I still think the general public is undervaluing Baltimore receivers based on like past preconceived notions of what a Baltimore offense looks like.
Yeah, you nailed it, Em. I think that's one of the best players to target, and for two reasons. One being what you said, that offense is going to look so different. Greg Roman ran that offense for the last few years. It was run heavy, play action based. Now it's going to be Todd Monken's spread it out, 11 personnel, air this thing out, and that does lead to value. I also think one thing that's interesting is over time, things have changed in the NFL as far as how fast the wide receiver position can acclimate itself. In the past, there used to be something called the year 3 breakout at wide receiver, and it led to a lot of bad values for rookies early on, for people who invested in rookies early on. That's just no longer the case anymore. Rookies are making an impact at the position a lot faster than expected. Two of the top draft picks at the wide receiver position, not top, but within the top 10 this year, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, they were rookies last year, and they're already ready to break out now in year 2. So I think every year it's almost a cheat code to get these guys. Jackson Smith-Njigba, after the injury, looks like he's going to be back at least before week 4 because he's not on the PUP list. He's a great target. Zay Flowers is still going really late, I think because, Beckham's there and Rashad Bateman. But like you said, he has the talent that can immediately translate. Honestly, all of the rookies. Quentin Johnson, I feel like, is a really good value too.
True.
And if you really need a flyer late, how about Jalen Hyatt from the Giants? He's been phenomenal this preseason. They're not going to keep that kind of talent off the field. And of course, I had to get a Giants reference in here.
Well, when you said that he's not going to be, that JSN you think is not going to be out, he'll be back before week 4. My heart sunk because the Giants play the damn Seahawks in week 4, and I'm going to that game, Dan. I'm going to the night game.
That game too.
You are? All right. Well, we'll catch up then, and chat about that. But yeah, Flowers I really love in later rounds as well. I'm curious what your assessment is of the tight end market this year, because it seems so top heavy that I almost wonder if just taking a few flyers later is the better strategy, because I don't want to take Mark Andrews in round 2. That's just me. And I'm not in a position to take Kelsey in the first round. And so after that, I have questions about the offense as it relates to Kyle Pitts. I love Darren Waller, I gotta say, but even there, once Waller is gone, I kind of like Freiermuth, but everybody else I have a ton of questions about.
I think you're onto something there, Emma. And it's funny, we do draft for us at CBS. We have mock drafts that start essentially in May and run all the way through the end of August, like 2 a week. And it was funny because I used to be able to get, sorry about that. I used to be able to get Darren Waller in the round 6, round 7 range, and I was snapping up every time. Now he's moved all the way up to the back end around 4. Right. Sometimes I've seen him go even sooner. So that value's kind of gone there too. So I'm with you. If I'm not getting Travis Kelce, I'm waiting at the position. And a few guys I really like late. The number 1 guy I've had all draft season, you could probably still get him for free, as in last round, second to third last round. If you're in a home league, if you're in a more competitive league, you might want to go a little bit higher, but it's Luke Musgrave, the rookie tight end from Green Bay. I loved his talent coming out of the draft. He has a side speed profile, and the way he moves on the field, it is Gronk-like. He's not Gronk, but it's Gronk-like in the athleticism. And I thought it would take him a little while to maybe acclimate himself to the NFL, but nope, that's not the case. All throughout the preseason, he's had 100% of the snaps with Jordan Love in the first team offense. His route participation has been near 100%, and the target share has been crazy high for a rookie tight end. So Luke Musgrave's the type of guy I'm not trying to leave any draft with. But on the flip side, I also really like Dalton Kincaid, the Bills rookie tight end. He may not play as many snaps as Musgrave, but he's playing snaps in a Josh Allen offense with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I would rather wait and get those players late. And even Chiga Konku is another guy to keep in mind from the Titans, had a really good fantasy profile on a small sample size last year, has really explosive metrics as well from an athletic standpoint. So look, if I'm not getting Kelsey, I'm doing exactly what you did. I'm not going to invest that high capital on Andrews. I'm doing the same with players like Kittle, even now Waller, since he was pushed up. I'm just waiting.
Yeah, I just don't see the value there with some of these tight ends in the first 4 rounds. And people just panic and they try to draft earlier on or overdraft somebody, and you might have to, right? It's really just about, I would say, picking the players that you want to draft, that you believe in, and having a gut feel. In the end, that's usually what you go with, I would say, as as like a tiebreaker, right? Like, you can talk about value all you want, but in the end, if the player doesn't sit right with you, you're not going to feel good. Even if you got great value for that player, you're not going to remember that later on. And that's also brings me to a question about the quarterback position in fantasy, which, for years, fantasy experts had been telling people, wait on the quarterback. You can get way better value later on. Now people are kind of catching on to running quarterbacks have more success, but like I overdrafted, for example, Joe Burrow last year to pair him and stack him with T. Higgins. And I ended up winning the league. It's disputed because of the DeMar Hamlin situation, but we'll put that aside for a second. Like, I overdrafted Burrow, but I wanted stability at that position. And I think that that's something that people should keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's the second biggest change in the landscape. The first was more receivers drafted early in rounds 1 through 3 than there have been. The second is quarterbacks actually having value when you draft them earlier. I used to subscribe to the late round quarterback strategy almost as a guarantee for every draft I went to. That was one QB. I mostly play in 2 QB Superflex. Let's just talk 1 QB leagues for now. But now that's changed a lot. Now I find myself getting into that range of Herbert, who I love this year, in that 3 rounds 3 to 5 range, Burrow, because the top of the position now is outscoring that middle tier when it used to be a lot closer. That was the whole reason for going late round quarterback, because the top guys didn't outscore the middle and the third tier by that much versus the other positions. Now those top guys really are outscoring the position to a degree where it is worth it to get, because quarterbacks are always the position that are going to score the most on a weekly basis, raw total wise.
Right.
If it made, so if you could start, if there was no starter running back, starter receiver, starter tight end, all we do is draft quarterbacks first. But in the format where you only start 1, it made a little more sense in the past to maybe wait on them, because you only need 12 to start in your league and there's 32 starting on a weekly basis. But nowadays, with the top outscoring the middle and the final tier by so much, it's just not the case. So I'm okay with going up and getting any of those top 7 quarterbacks.
Who are you lower on than consensus? For me, it's Justin Fields. I know he's a great rusher, and that will always provide fantasy value, but I really worry about the consistency of that offense if you're trying to have stability at that position. Curious just which quarterbacks you think, should be ranked higher in ADP versus who maybe you would rank a little bit lower.
I like that question. It's always a fun one. I'm going to say I'll go with higher first. I think Justin Herbert should be ranked a little bit higher ADP-wise. I think Brock Purdy is the best value you can find, but that's more for 2 QB and Superflex leagues. He was QB 8 on a per-game basis in fantasy football last year, and all of a sudden now he's being drafted outside the top 20, even though they just traded Trey Lance, and I guess Sam Darnold is somewhat of a threat there. The last one for undervalued would be Geno Smith. And as far as overvalued, I actually don't have too many that I think are overvalued. I think Fields is an interesting one. I won't say that I think he's overvalued, Emma, but I will say this, and this says something. I play in a ton of Superflex and 2 QB leagues where quarterbacks are gold, and I don't have any shares yet of Fields. So it probably says something about where I actually feel about him.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to do it.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is that, I just think people are overcorrecting for estimating Jalen Hurts last year, who it was more of an unknown, and then he was QB1 by the end of the year, and they're thinking, okay, this is year 3 for Justin Fields. He's going, or is it year 2? Year 3 for Justin Fields. He's going to make that same leap where the Chicago Bears' support system, even though it's great that they got DJ Moore, it's not what the Eagles had. The Eagles had an all-star team at receiver, at tight end, best offensive line in the league, arguably, last year. That's not an equivalent jump that can be had. I think it's just too much to put on Justin Fields from a leap from last year to this year, from a fantasy perspective.
I completely agree with that statement. And I think in some ways, I'm not willing to say this, but in some ways, the 6-round difference you get for somebody like Anthony Richardson, for example.
Yeah.
Should it really be a 6-round discount from Fields when we're really still uncertain about both of them as passers? We're uncertain about both their offensive lines. I guess Fields has DJ Moore as a weapon vis-a-vis Richardson, who maybe just has Michael Pittman or something like that. But I still think that's way too big of a gap. I think you made a great point there with Fields.
What do you think about the gap between Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs not being as large as ADP would suggest? Because both teams very invested, first-round picks and the running backs not taken too far from each other, and they want to like have a high-powered offense over there in Detroit.
They do. I think I'm actually, so Gibbs is one of the players I'm much lower on than consensus for me. I have him ranked in a really what people would consider would be an odd spot. I have no shares of him. I kind of find his whole fantasy stock a little curious to me with David Montgomery signing there, because I do think David Montgomery is still going to have the red zone role for the most part. I think he's going to still have most of the early down role. And I still don't think we're talking about an offense that's necessarily like immediately the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals. Like this is still an offense that is Jared Goff. It's still an offense that in some ways is playing a little more ball control at times. But I do think he has some intrigue, obviously, with his speed and the fact that they use that draft capital on him. So I don't know if I think the gap there is too big. But I also think in some ways, Bijan Robinson, I loved him going into draft season, Emma, but now it's like he goes in some leagues 3, 4, 5 overall. You're kind of sapping any upside that you might have. It's already baked into the price at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't think I have too many shares of either so far.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I'm also staying away from in the first round guys like I would say Cooper Kupp, and I know that that's a little bit controversial, but I think that there's a good chance he could sit later in the year because the Rams are going to be bad. And as talented as Kupp is, he is really the only option. It's him and Tyler Higbee, and the rest of the offense, what are they going to do? So I curious if you think, I phrased every question with curious in it, but I'm tired putting that aside. Is there value in having that rule for yourself that when you're investing a lot of value through your first or second round pick in players, unless it's in an extreme situation, being like, I want to make sure this guy is still competing in December? Do you see that as already baked into the value of the pick or the ADP, or as something that you should consider in your drafts if you were giving advice to our listeners here?
It's an interesting concept. I haven't really factored into my strategy as much, I should say, maybe. It's something to think about, though, for sure, with some of these teams like the Rams or the Cardinals, for example, who obviously made the decision today to cut Colt McCoy, and they're going to go with either a rookie or a quarterback they just traded for. It's like,
oh my
God.
They
going to play through? Yeah.
I mean,
especially
Dobbs
when
is,
the draft.
Sorry, just ahead. Dobbs is not an impressive quarterback. That is they are tanking so hard. My God. Okay, sorry. Continue, Dan. Sorry.
To answer your question, I would say maybe you do factor it in more in a year like this when a draft class does have somebody like a Caleb Williams in it. And Caleb Williams, for those who don't know, the USC quarterback, he's going to be, when all is said and done, at least for me, he's going to have as high a grade as I gave Trevor Lawrence coming out of his draft class. That's the type of guy who's a lock 1-1 type overall type of guy that teams, even if they don't admit it, will be wanting to lose games at the end of the season to try to get.
100%. Last few questions here. I guess who would you say is the kind of players that you should target in rounds like 6 through 8, right? Where you might be considering making your bench a little bit more robust versus what you see with maybe waiting for a while to take a quarterback or a tight end. Like, what is the sweet spot for strategy in that particular range?
Yeah, sure. From that mid-round range, I think there's definitely some players from the running back and the receiver position that I'm targeting that I can give out now. Some players that I like are Javonte Williams, the running back from the Broncos. Look, he's back from that ACL faster than people expected, but the ADP hasn't really commiserated with it. And I'll say this, if you look at the Sean Payton history as a head coach / offensive coordinator, whatever you want to call him, he called plays in New Orleans. The running backs, from a fantasy standpoint, were insanely productive there because they always had a role in the passing game, and he will have a role in the passing game. Russell Wilson has not thrown to running backs a lot in his career. That's about to change because the entire offense is going to be run through the running backs in a lot of ways. So I like him. I like Khalil Herbert a lot from the Bears. He's been running as mostly the only running back with the first team offense, and his ADP really hasn't risen either. Another guy I would target there is Isaiah Pacheco from the Chiefs. Just another example of the injury through the training camp has kind of kept that value down, but he has an opportunity in that offense to be great. And if you're going deeper at that position, Zach Charbonnet, the rookie running back out of UCLA for Seattle. I think when all is said and done, one of my bold predictions from earlier in the year, Emma, was that he could outscore Ken Walker there. I think there's a chance he could get the red zone role right away and run away with it and then work his way into the passing down role because he's a better passing down back than Walker.
And
There's also
Walker
a few
can't stay
receivers.
healthy. Well, Walkers can't stay healthy as well, right? So that's the
Yep.
issue.
Right. And that's another issue. You want me to go over some receivers in that
Yeah,
range
that'd
I
be
like
great.
as well?
That'd be great.
Sure. Some receivers down there that I like. Gabe Davis this year. I'm back on the train. I think part of the reason people are so off on Gabe Davis is because they were burned by him last year. And
Yeah.
I get it, but in week 3, he suffered an ankle injury that really sapped his ability to explode and get in and out of his breaks. And for a player who's a big play threat like him, that's just going to kill your whole season. And now he's fully healthy. He's going into a contract year right now with the Bills. I just think he has such a good chance to bounce back there. And then like we talked about earlier in that range, I'd be okay going up top and starting to get some of these rookies like Addison, like Jackson Smith and Jigba, like Zay Flowers. I'm okay because if you look at the history of these rookie receivers in recent years, they're starting to really hit the ground running and be like, if you drafted Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave last year, they gave you a really good chance to win your league, and they didn't cost anything from a draft capital standpoint. So those are some of the guys too. And then one final guy I'll throw out there, Emma, is Eli Moore, the former Jets wide receiver. You can get him super late, probably more in like the round 10 range, 9-10 range. And just the way they've used him so far in training camp in the preseason, I absolutely love it. A lot of gadget plays, sometimes in the backfield in motion as a running back. That just screams PPR type of steal for me. So he's one other guy to keep an eye on.
All right, last question here. Which offenses do you think are being undervalued as a whole from a fantasy perspective? Part of me wants to say the Steelers. I feel like Pickens and Deontay Johnson, to your point about like, you know, a candidate to overperform since he had 0 touchdowns last year, being Deontay Johnson. But like, I'm very impressed with what I saw from the Steelers offense. The line looked decent, and they're not even playing their first round pick. The offensive tackle out of Tennessee, was it? Yeah. Broderick Jones? Am I Georgia? Jesus. Yeah, I can't that the Tennessee guy went to Chicago. Anyway, they look pretty damn good, and Matt Canada, you know, made everybody really angry last year, but they could bounce back, and then if they're somewhat competent, they'll be relevant later in the year too.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'm not as high on them just because I just don't like Matt Canada as an offensive schemer, and I was disappointed they brought him back. I thought they would upgrade from that standpoint. But a few teams that I kind of like in that range, it's not the most fun one to talk about for obvious reasons off the field, but I do think the Browns could be a super good value team this year. I think that offense is going to go pass heavy and pass first, which people are not ready for, they're not expecting. And I just think players like Amari Cooper, Eli Moore, who I mentioned earlier, and Dave Njoku are all great values. And I think Nick Chubb could find his way into the top 5 range there. And then finally, another team that I like in that range also is the Chargers. Moving on to Kellen Moore is so good for them. Kellen Moore over the last 3 years with the Cowboys has been first and second overall in offensive pace per game. That is an up-tempo offense. That just means more plays for you and for your fantasy team, more chances to score. Add to that a first-round receiver in Quentin Johnston, and more importantly for me at least, because you know what I like the film. They bring back Rashawn Slater at left tackle. To me, that was the main reason they failed last year because he got injured. Now he's back, and I just think that offense is going to completely take off. I think both of those are probably the 2 most undervalued offenses.
That makes sense. Yeah, you're speaking Bradley's language. He's obsessed with the Chargers and can never stop.
Can't quit him.
Can't quit him. But I agree with you just because I think people are – I mean, Dak Prescott, when Kellen Moore became his offensive coordinator, that was when he had his fantasy breakout year as a quarterback. And I could see that definitely happening. Joe Lombardi is one of my least favorite offensive play callers I've ever seen in the league. I'm so glad Justin Herbert doesn't have to deal with him anymore. But Thomas from Texas writes in, huge Big Blue Banter fan. Hello, Dan. So wanted to read that to you before we let you go. We got some crossover here with Big Blue Banter.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Dan, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for your expertise, and hope people who are listening to this heed some of Dan's advice, man, all blending together ahead of their fantasy drafts. Dan Schneier of CBS, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Emma. It was great. I had a great time.
For sure. And also, just really quickly, Dan, where can people find more of your work on fantasy football and other things if they want to hear more from you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find all the fantasy football insight over at cbssports.com/fantasy. One cool thing about CBS Sports that we've always been is free. All of our content is free. We have a lot of in-depth content as far as rankings, specific to leagues. And obviously you can find me as well on the Fantasy Football Today podcast, where I make appearances on F15.5 and then the Mailbag Show. And then if you like the Giants and you like X's and O's and game film and all that kind of fun stuff, check out Big Blue Banter. It's an in-depth Giants podcast. And I think once you check it out, if you are a Giants fan, you probably won't leave us after that. That's kind of my bragging way of saying, come give our show a shot.
Totally agree. You and Nick do great work over there. Thanks so much, Dan. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, guys. With that, we're just going to read some IMs, and then we're going to get out of here. I mean, man, yeah. See, Antonin Scalia Ghost drafted all three of those RBs: Pacheco, Herbert, Khalil Herbert, you mean, and Charbonnet last night. Wow. Nice. Well, there you go. I mean, keep us updated, Antonin Scalia Ghost. If that bears fruit for you. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator: Packers over Lions. Bet against Dan Campbell at your own risk. Something one butt cheek. Well, you know.
Yeah, how many times is Dan Campbell going to cry? That should be my metric for whether they'll win win more games than they did.
I will put Matt LaFleur's like multiple division titles up there with Dan Campbell's none of those things anyway, just to like bet against that slightly. And Tifa Lockhart: the Packers are being undervalued because they suck. Hope that helps. I don't think that's true. Especially, I would put their roster up against the Bears any day of the week. High value man: Aaron Rodgers was throwing air balls this weekend. Sorry, Bradley, but the Jets will remain a poverty team. I don't know how that's possible with that defense. They are definitely going to be relevant.
He had a pretty good pass to Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, what are you talking about? That was a beautiful back shoulder touch pass.
Amount of points in that game.
Oh yeah.
And this is coming from someone who's not particularly optimistic.
Understood. Dylan from Australia: what do you make of Texas A&M this year? Lots of people are saying they could make state. Can't tell you. Do not know.
No, I'm in the Jimbo Fisher experiment. Well, actually, no, Jimbo's not there. Is Jimbo Fisher there? He's not in Florida State anymore. I think the Jimbo Fisher's experiment in A&M was a massive failure. So, I'm not confident for the Aggies, unfortunately. But gig 'em.
All right, guys. I have to run now. It is 5:30. We're gonna wrap up the first hour of this program. No, God, that is the Majority Report. I just gotta let you guys know. I don't know if I've ever been this
heading into the fun
tired from a work perspective. I had my best friend's wedding 2 weekends ago, came back, hosted the show, plus ESVN, plus our late night draft coverage. Debate coverage.
The first
I haven't eaten
pick.
in a little while, so I'm losing steam. Then this weekend, it was one of my good friends from high school's 30th birthdays. I had to travel to go see her for that. I'm so tired. Like, I don't even know how to express it.
No,
so
you need to sleep. You need a nap.
I really need a nap, and I'm going to go do that. So I appreciate you all. Thanks so much. We will see you next Thursday when Bradley is back from vacation and we give our NFL Mega Picks show. We're giving our picks for week 1 too, and then like Super Bowl winners and things like that.
Woo!
Our competition begins again
Can't wait.
on Thursday. Bye bye.